Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomena my whole life.
My name is Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non-human technology.
Or at least we will once Sean Kirkpatrick stops running interference.
Sean. It raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they still may be unlikely, but even if it's new science and not aliens.
Woo! It's a very exciting time.
Yeah. And quick reminder for everyone, before we get into it, you can find our show notes at veryexcitingtime.com or support us by going to patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
Okay. So, we've got a bunch of stuff going on this weekend, this week. I've got a bunch of notes in here, but before we get into anything, Chuck, did you watch the Super Bowl?
The superb owl? No, I did not.
For those of our audio listeners who may not know what Chuck and I look like, it's safe to say, take what you imagine your typical American football fan looks like. We're like the opposite of that. We're big freaking nerd. We are not Super Bowl guys, nor are we particularly Taylor Swift stans. So neither one of us had any particular reason to watch the Super Bowl, but Chuck,
the commercials.
As always, the commercials were the best part. And this year, Chuck, there were no less than 5 commercials in the Super Bowl that involved aliens.
Are you counting the Michael Cera V commercials?
Did those involve aliens?
No, but I feel like they might have if we look closely enough.
All right. Those commercials were funny, but no, I was not counting them. So a quick rundown, from least to most impressive. The actor from So Help Me Todd was kind of summarizing his show and mentioning what it was about. And he claimed his show was about aliens before correcting himself. Oreos had an ad where, twisting open an Oreo summoned a UFO.
I totally
Mountain Dew. Right. Mountain Dew had an ad where Aubrey Plaza was abducted by aliens. It was kind of funny, actually. It was the whole gimmick was Aubrey Plaza, like, at her most excited, still sounds kind of bland. So she's like, well, I'm having a good time. And it was her in increasingly absurd situations saying she's having a good time because she's still got a Mountain Dew. And one of them was she's being sucked up into the air by an alien. Awesome. There was a bizarre ad for apartments.com where Jeff Goldblum interrupts this like incredibly tense military standoff where the military is talking to aliens. They're like, why are you here? And Jeff Goldblum's like, well, obviously they're here to rent a good apartment. Very weird ad.
Yeah.
But the one probably everyone is thinking of and that people have been talking about is Martin Scorsese directed a Squarespace commercial. It's like a minute and a half long. It's a Martin Scorsese movie that happens to be an ad for Squarespace. It opens with a montage of real-world UFO-related footage, including crop circles, the gimbal video, congressional hearings, even a quick shot of the Nazca mummies, which we still need to do an episode on at some point. And then it cuts to aliens up in their flying saucer, like flying around trying to get humans to notice them, but the humans won't look up from their phones. So they have to create a website that says, hey, hello down there. And they all look up and see the alien.
Yeah.
So
totally checks out.
It cracks me up. Like, what is happening? 5 ads mentioning aliens.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the UFO topic is kind of cracking something, like the collective consciousness, maybe. But what was the mood of all the the commercials? Like, were they scary or excited or like?
So that's what I think is really interesting about it, right? So a few years ago, if you had told me that a bunch of Super Bowl commercials involved aliens, I would have assumed the aliens were the joke,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Usually it's, we're riffing on paranoid conspiracy theorist, oh, this guy's a crackpot because he believes in
Right.
aliens, or, the aliens are some like goofy thing that ends up selling the product. And none of these ads were like that. In all of them, the alien part was just kind of accepted as a given. The joke was subverting your expectations around the alien, right? Big tense military standoff with aliens. Yeah, everyone understands this, but surprise, they're here to rent apartments,
Yeah.
The aliens are abducting people, but surprise, Aubrey Plaza's enjoying it because she has a Mountain Dew. Martin Scorsese's one, especially, like, the joke is that people won't look up from their phones, so you have to have a website. He could have done that a million different ways. It could have been someone walking down the street and a piano falling on their head. Like a million ways to tell this exact joke. He landed not only on the idea of aliens having to create a website because no one will look at them, but also he opens with a montage of serious real world stuff, not just riffing on goofy green skinned aliens. It was really weird, man. So this is kind of a theme on our show, right? Is noticing that the tone and tenor of our cultural engagement with UFOs has shifted dramatically since 2017, and especially in the last couple of years, to where this isn't a like giggle and play X-Files music anymore. Like, not everybody takes it 100% seriously, but it's no longer like a completely ridiculous topic.
Wow. This is kind of monumental when you think about it. And from what I hear, this is what it's like in a lot of other countries. So it's kind of just us, but I know our culture exports a lot as well. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
As soon as
really, really weird moment.
As soon as we see UFO commercials for like the FIFA World Cup, we'll know we've made it.
There you go. Yeah. So speaking of videos, I've got another like quick news item. You remember we were talking about the Seoul conference, SOL? It was Gary Nolan's thing where he was putting on a big, serious scientific conference about UFOs. Yeah, big name speakers. That was when we were talking about catastrophic disclosure because Carl.
I don't think I knew the.
I
don't think I knew the name of it, but okay, yeah.
So at the time, Gary said the videos are going to be up real soon. The UFO community was ready to tar and feather him because he said they would be up soon and then didn't upload it. Obviously, it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, right.
Gary came out and he's like, no, actually, it's the completely normal thing. We're a new conference. The company that recorded things for us, I thought they were going to edit it. They said they weren't. So they're now sending me the raw files and I need to go get them edited. It'll take a little while, but trust me, they're coming. So anyway, long story short, they're all up on the website now. I haven't had a chance to watch a single one.
Okay. All right.
But I suspect that will be an upcoming episode. I don't want to commit to it being our next episode, but like I've got some videos to watch. Yeah. But I suspect there's stuff to talk about there.
Yeah. Cool. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And, if you or anyone in the audience doesn't want to wait for me, I'll have their YouTube channel linked in the show notes.
Yeah.
So let's get to the real meat of the week.
All right. Let's get weird.
So on Wednesday, Representative Mike Turner, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, caused a little bit of a frenzy in Washington when he issued a statement saying that the panel had, quote, information concerning a serious national security threat and called on Biden to declassify it so Congress could openly talk about it.
Yeah. So I saw that. That was like the Russian nukes in space, which 100% could totally believe. But I thought it turned out to be like an anti-satellite EMP weapon or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is why you might have seen there was a bit of like, this is much ado about nothing. Like, we've been theorizing EMPs as a satellite defensive weapon since the freaking Cold War. Like, the only thing that's new is there was some intel showing that Russia may be very close to finalizing this tech and considering launching it. Mike Turner made
that more.
Yeah, totally. And Mike Turner made a big deal about it. And some of the other people in Congress are kind of pissed at him. They think that it wasn't actually that pressing an issue, but he was using it to kind of grandstand to raise more defense budget for, Ukraine and stuff like that. Whatever. Again, this is not, this is a political show, but really only about one very specific topic. So,
right. I mean, politicians are going to politish.
Right. What's funny is the UFO community was all over this story.
Yeah? Why?
Turner's statement did not say what it is. The news about what it actually is didn't come out until Friday. Like they were downplaying it immediately. But part of the reason the UFO community was on it, at first you'd think, oh, they're just assuming he's talking about a big national security threat. It must be UFOs.
Right.
But they weren't doing it for no reason. Coincidentally, on Wednesday, there was a congressional briefing by Lue Elizondo about UAP at about his time as the director of ATIP, which, if you're not familiar, is the precursor to Arrow. Like, there was a UFO briefing, and then Mike Turner comes out and says, big national security threat that we need to declassify immediately.
Yeah, okay. I see why the community would freak out if Big Daddy Lou is in the House talking about UFOs, and suddenly the House Intelligence Committee chairperson is like, we got a big problem.
Yeah, right? That's totally understandable.
Do we have details?
We don't have a lot of details. This was not a classified briefing, and confusingly, it was only to the Republicans. I don't really know what's up with that. But what we do know is Lou was joined by a couple of unidentified people, one of whom was a former member of the UAP task force, another was a former fighter pilot, and another was a former DARPA scientist. The member of the UAP task force may have also been a combat pilot. It's unclear. A bunch of the news reports said 2 pilots and a scientist, but none of them are identified. It's hard to say. But what's interesting is Liberation Times reported that attendees left the session, quote, deeply concerned about the inability to openly discuss the national security implications of UAP due to classification. And some members wanted to declassify UAP info to enable security discussions within the government and with allies.
Oh, like that bill you just shut down that would do exactly that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, funny.
Fuck. All right, maybe that's why it was only to the Republicans. Like,
maybe
the Democrats are already for it. I don't know.
Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, maybe that is it. Maybe it's Lou trying to course correct a little bit. So, I mean, the good news is we've been hearing this for a while. This is basically what Lou and Chris Mellon have been doing since To the Stars collapsed, is acting like lobbyists, going to Congress and trying to get them to take it seriously, introducing them to whistleblowers, helping them draft legislation. They've been heavily involved behind the scenes.
Right.
But what's funny. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is how lobbying. Little bias here, but I feel like this is how lobbying should work. Like, absolutely, lobbyists should be giving Congress people facts, not vacations. And it bugs me that that's not how lobbying actually works.
100% agree.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is you may have noticed some overlap between what this was about and, with people wanting to declassify things, and then Mike Turner coming out. And apparently some of the language that he used was like lifted verbatim from their discussion with Lou. He just wasn't talking about UAPs. He was talking about the Russian nuclear satellites. So all that is to say, I'm always kind of prepared to throw the UFO community under the bus a little bit for overreacting and making much ado about nothing. In this case, there was genuinely something here. There was a reason to be like, what the freak is happening here? And
Yeah.
later it turned out to be, Mike was off doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Very strange story.
Yeah.
Now, we do have a couple of quotes from people who
Okay.
were in there. Most notably, Representative Ralph Norman came out and talked to Ask a Poll, and he said, "We've got a real problem. This isn't playland. He told us about the facts of the matter, about what's happening, and that was concerning. He wouldn't give any classified things, but my God, this isn't political. This isn't politics. It affects all of us, young and old. It's been portrayed by the media as crazies that are identifying UFOs, but it's not."
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, the vibe from Representative Norman is he is not part of Burchett's UAP caucus. He's one of the, quote unquote, normal congressional people who don't think about UFOs on a daily basis. So he was kind of slapped in the face by what we've all kind of learned over the years, that, hey, there is evidence that there is something in the air, and we don't know what it is, but it's a security threat. And it's really alarming that the military doesn't seem to be taking it seriously.
Right. And it's unclear what this is in his statement to me. Like, it's like, I don't know if he's talking about UAP or if he's talking about that folks are lying to Congress or...
That's a really good point. So Norman goes on a little bit. He says, Elizondo talked for 20 minutes, and then we answered questions. He brought in 2 pilots that had actually witnessed it, seen it. He showed slides of it, which was unbelievable. When he says slides, I'm pretty sure he means photos, not just PowerPoint, but who knows.
I like the idea of like old school like slide projectors, or like you had to go to Kinko's and get like one of those clear pieces of paper and like put it in.
An overhead projector. Yeah,
an overhead. Yeah.
He had a scientist. He had a combat pilot that had flown missions and reported what he saw and took pictures. So this isn't some figment of our imagination. And he was really playing up the fact that Lue Elizondo was a combat veteran. So we've talked a lot about this before, how like there's a stigma against UAP stuff because for a long time it was like Travis Walton, right? Like some dude out in the woods in the middle of nowhere gets abducted by a UFO and disappears for a few days. And, were there aliens or was he just drunk? Like, they weren't the most credible of witnesses. And the thing Lue and Chris Mellon have really hammered on is bringing forward the most credible witnesses. It sucks that military pilots get taken more seriously than other witnesses, but you understand why that would be. To someone who isn't neck deep in this topic, hey, here's someone who we trust to fly $1 billion piece of equipment and make split-second decisions that might result in us going to war.
Right.
That dude says he saw something.
Yeah.
That dude's co-pilot says she saw something. Their radar controller said they saw something. Here's a photo they took of the something they saw. This isn't some crazy guy. This is a real person who we trust to evaluate these things.
Totally.
So Norman kind of went on about like, these are credible witnesses. And then he made another point that I liked. He said, and you got to realize that Elizondo, he has no reason to do this. He's not getting paid. He comes up here free of charge and is sending us all the slides.
Yeah. So, that's crazy. So he's got like pilot witnesses, slides, feels like the congressional hearings.
Yep.
Did they like talk about Grush at all?
Funny you ask. Representative Norman confirmed that Elizondo, quote, absolutely corroborated Grush's claims of an illegal crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Now, he didn't get into details, but, like Matt Laszlo from Ask Paul was trying to ask him, like, what did you hear about? And he was kind of dancing around, not answering. He's like, did you hear anything about like special access programs, these illegal crash retrievals? Did he corroborate Grush's claims? And Representative Norman said, absolutely. So that's pretty great.
That's so cool.
Later, Representative Burleson, who we've heard from in many other
Yeah.
contexts, echoed that. He said, those guys, from what they presented, and of course, this is not in a secure setting, they weren't under oath, but what they presented is very similar to what David Grush was presenting.
Very nice. Well,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Right? So it was kind of nice to see the UFO community freaking out about something a congressman said, and it
Yeah.
turned out to be nothing, but it wasn't nothing.
Yeah.
Like, there was
Right.
something happening. Lue Elizondo was there. He did brief
Mhm.
people, and we did get some interesting insight into what they thought about what Lue said. So
Yeah.
good
right.
going. Keep it up, Big Daddy Lue. We love you.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of military,
Mhm.
so in late January, the DOD Inspector General, and remember, we've talked a bit before that there are two Inspectors General. There's the Intelligence Community Inspector General, who
Yeah.
is the one that found Grush's claims serious and credible,
Right.
or sorry, urgent and credible. And then there's the DOD IG, who we've heard
And
less from.
There's more than just two, but
I'm sure, but those are the two who we've interacted with as we're talking about David Grush's
Yeah.
claims.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
the DOD Inspector General in January released an unclassified summary of a classified report that came out in August of last year, which was called the Evaluation of the DOD's Actions Regarding Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena.
nice.
I don't know about anybody else. I hadn't heard a whisper of this
Yeah,
thing.
right.
And usually Arrow is very like, we're working on a report. You're going to get the annual report, and we're working on the historical summary. Like they're kind of like
Yeah.
telegraphing these things. The DODIG just kind of dropped this out of nowhere.
Yeah. But that's kind of what,
Excuse
from what you were saying, that's kind of what the inspector generals generally do. They don't talk about it because they expect that everyone is going to leak it.
Yeah, totally. Now, what's interesting is in the press release for it, he says, we are releasing this because of the public's high level of interest in the UAP topic.
So were they,
but-
do you think they were getting like FOIA requests like every day or
sure.
something?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
But what's
Good for
really
us.
interesting is the DODIG, the reason they did this was they wanted to look into like, how is the military as a whole handling UAP? What are we doing about
Mhm.
it? Like, what is
Yeah.
the current state of affairs? The brutal summary of it is the DOD Office of the Inspector General found that the DOD does not have a comprehensive, coordinated approach to address the UAP. The DOD Office of the Inspector General also found that the DOD's lack of a comprehensive, coordinated approach to address UAP may pose a threat to military forces and national security.
Yeah. All right. Good. Way to catch up. This is what like Elizondo and UFO Daddy Chris Mellon have been saying the whole time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's still really good to see
Yeah.
the IG is kind of a watchdog organization. To
Yeah,
see them
that's
coming
their
out and saying,
job.
not only do you not have a plan, but that lack of a plan is putting us at risk.
Yeah.
So
it
yeah,
is causing
very good to
problems.
see.
Yeah.
And yeah, you mentioned Elizondo. Yeah, this is the drum he's been beating the whole time. For those of our listeners who haven't been here since day one, Elizondo was running ATIP, which is a precursor to Arrow. It was a private, a classified group that was investigating UAP inside the DOD.
But not private.
He resigned and went public because he was concerned that he couldn't get anyone to take what he was finding seriously. His resignation letter said, quote, underestimating or ignoring these potential UAP threats is not in the best interest of the department.
Right. But it wasn't private, like private enterprise, right?
No, sorry, I said
confidential.
private. What I meant was classified. It was
Okay.
a secret group, as
Yeah,
opposed to
got
Arrow,
it.
which is a public facing org.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So what was in it?
Yeah, so there are two findings, which I just kind of
Okay.
summarized for you, but I want to go over some of the details because I think they're interesting.
Yeah.
The first finding is the DoD does not have a comprehensive, coordinated approach to address UAP. Quote, the DoD has not used a coordinated approach to detect, report, collect, analyze, and identify UAP. As a result, the DoD response to UAP incidents is uncoordinated and concentrated within each military department. Officials stated that they have been waiting for the DoD to issue comprehensive UAP guidance before developing their own guidance.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, my mom calls this strategic incompetence. And, not in reference to me, of course, but
No, of course not.
no, of course not.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old thing, right? Like, don't appear to be good at a job that you don't want.
Yeah.
So they kept going. They said, quote, DoD components have largely excluded geographic combat commands, which are responsible for detecting, deterring, and preventing threats and attacks against the U.S. and its territories, possessions, and bases in their respective areas of responsibility. Therefore, the combat commands would be the logical organizations to detect, report, collect, and identify UAP incidents to ARROW.
So what? I'm confused. What is a geographic combat command?
That is a really good question, and I'm gonna tip my hat here. I looked that up because I didn't know. There was a possibility that Chuck would already know this. Chuck has more of a military family background than me.
Yeah.
I was a little afraid he'd be like, Scott, everyone knows this. But
Yeah.
anyway, thank you, Chuck, for playing my patsy here.
Yeah, sure.
A geographic combat command is a joint organization responsible for coordinating multiple branches of the military in a specific region. So, for example, there's Africa Command, there's Central Command for operations in the Middle East, there's Space Command for the secret lunar space war,
for the moon base. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is a joint command overseeing many military branches that happens to be geographic in nature. That's okay. What I wrote in response to this makes no sense. That is fascinating because in some ways that does make a lot of sense because it is cross military branches, but also feels like it still has the same problem where Central Command is going to have a different process than Africa Command for what
the
reason?
Nail on the head here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to kind of restate, my understanding is previously I thought of the DoD as an umbrella organization over the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Force, etc. That's still true, but there's also in any given geographical region, you would have the geographical command between the military division and the DoD. So it's kind of like a little mini DoD in each region of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if I want to learn a lot more about this. I wonder if it is DoD or if it's like a committee or how they met. I don't know. That's fascinating.
Yeah, they've got a page for it up on the military website. It is not clear what the org is. Okay. All I was able to find out is that the commander of each region is like a 4-star general or equivalent, which doesn't really tell you anything. But
could probably still be any of the branches, but unless maybe we'll leave it at it's complicated.
It's complicated. Yeah. It's worth the reason I'm kind of hammering on this is we're about to get to some of their recommendations, and in the recommendations they talk about this a little more. So it's good to have a at least general understanding that there's the branches of the military, there's the DoD, there's also this other thing of the geographic command center.
God, that's interesting.
Yeah. So the third part of their first finding is DoD components developed varying informal processes. Boy, informal is carrying a lot of weight in that sentence. Developed varying informal processes to collect, analyze, and identify UAP incidents. For example, the Air Force designated UAP as a special interest item, which requires air crews to document and report UAP observations within 24 hours using the Marauder system. Army personnel also use the Air Force's Marauder system to document and report UAP observations because the Army has not developed its own UAP-specific processes.
That's great.
The military services have sent some UAP incident reports to Arrow, but the DoD does not currently formally require them to do so, despite the fact that the whole point of Arrow is to comprehensively gather and coordinate and collect. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the real question. Did the DODIG get that information from Arrow? Or anyways. So I will admit, I get a little twitchy when I hear phrases like formally require. And it makes me wonder if they actually need to make it required, or if they need to clearly set expectations that this is important and it needs to happen, and then work on the culture that makes it so that people don't want to report.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think it's both, right? And oddly enough, early on when Sean Kirkpatrick was talking about Arrow, he said some things that I found really encouraging. And one of them is he didn't think Arrow needed to be around forever. Arrow exists because of this problem. And once Arrow is done, its work will be defining these processes and centralizing and coordinating and establishing a culture and fighting against stigma. But there will come a point where they don't have any more work to do because the system is functioning and they can dissolve. Knowing what we know about Sean Kirkpatrick now, I question that, but I still think it's a good kind of vision of what could happen here. So I think formally require is representing the fact that we've got, even within the DoD as a whole, the different departments handle it very differently. We have seen the Navy be very forthcoming with UAP encounters, and the Air Force basically refused to participate in anything until forced to do so. So I think you need that formally required to drag the Air Force kicking and screaming along. But agreed. Hopefully in the long run, you don't need that.
Yeah. Been thinking a lot about this because of work. So, but
you have some malicious compliance and strategic incompetence going on.
There might be a little bit, but I guess that there are what you're saying sounds like there are different levels that that might need that kind of formal requirement, and different and other levels that require a culture shift, and
absolutely.
Probably relying on either of them to the exclusion of the other is foolhardy.
Totally. Yeah. And, belts and suspenders, right? Like, it never hurts to have both in place, Hopefully you don't need a law requiring people to do the right thing, but it's better to have the law in case you have someone who won't do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there,
before we get to the next finding, I wanted to say, I learned something recently. We were going through some documentation, and one of our lawyers said that we had to be very careful around any findings or recommendations that came from our outside lawyers. And I think it's fascinating that here we see findings and recommendations. Like, this is, I wouldn't have thought about this, but now I see they're like putting their findings and recommendations out. Like, this is a big deal. I knew it, but I didn't know quite how big a deal it was.
Yeah, totally. And, it's worth remembering, right? The Inspector General, like, what did they do? They conduct investigations into things that are not going right.
Right.
The fact the Inspector General office felt the need to review, hey, what are y'all doing about this? And then write it up, and then come out with recommendations. And we'll get to it. The response to the recommendations is fascinating. But there's a reason they were doing this.
Yeah. Cool.
So finding one is nobody knows what they're doing.
Checks out.
Finding two, the DoD's lack of a comprehensive coordinated approach to address UAP may pose a threat to military forces and U.S. national security. Hilariously, the section explaining finding one, that there is no comprehensive coordinated approach, is like a full page in this document. The finding two, that might cause problems, is like a single paragraph, because it almost doesn't need to be stated. Obviously this is a problem. Well, why is it a problem? Well, it's a problem because We determined that the DoD has no overarching UAP policy, and as a result, it lacks assurance that national security and flight safety threats to the United States from UAP have been identified and mitigated.
Yeah. It's like finding two. I almost feel like they can't write about it because they would have to acknowledge that UAP are a thing. Like,
Yeah, I mean, they are still very much in that, okay, we don't know what they are, but they
yeah,
could be a threat. And if we're not paying any attention to them, we could be exposing ourselves to risk. Like, they can't come out and
yeah,
say they are a threat because they don't know that.
right.
But they know that if you don't even look, you'll
Yeah,
never know.
that is a problem. Yeah, even I suppose even if they are all plastic bags or whatever, uh, we should probably at least, look out for that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
Okay.
I wrote down that this felt to me like the summary was, well, we tried doing nothing and we're all out of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, shit. That is pretty damning.
Right?
Uh, yeah, okay, so what recommendations did they have?
So they mention in the press release, and it's been widely reported, that they made 11 recommendations. Interestingly, only 5 of those recommendations are included in the unclassified report. So we're just
Interesting.
going to have to guess at what sort of classified recommendations they made. Maybe that's just
Yeah.
where they reserve their stronger language. Like, listen, you jerks, like, get your shit in order. Like,
Right. Yeah.
we'll be polite and would tell the public about it, but this shit ain't going to stand.
Right. Either that or it's the recommendation 6 is like move move the aliens out of the basement over here.
Yeah,
Hide
totally.
them a little better.
Come on, guys. We didn't even have to look that hard.
Exactly. Even Grush
All
found
right.
them.
So, recommendation 1. We recommend a DoD policy to integrate UAP roles, responsibilities, requirements, and coordination procedures into existing intelligence, counterintelligence, and force protection policies and procedures.
Got it.
So, hey, the DoD should have a UAP policy.
Yeah. I know all those words, but it's written in a way that I just like cannot parse it.
Oh,
Like,
I
I
know.
don't know what a
They've deliberately got to write it to be as like vague
Yeah.
as possible, but it boils down to there is no policy and
Yeah.
there should be one at the
You should
DoD
go do
level.
that. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
each of the recommendations was paired with the response they got from the people that recommendation
Oh,
was
okay.
targeted at. In
Okay.
this case, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security and the Aero Director agreed with the recommendation.
Oh, okay. Cool. Like, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean yes, we're gonna do it, or
You are getting to the meat of this report. In this particular case, they go on for 2 more paragraphs with the information that they got, which was all kind of hand waving from the USDINS, explaining that, hey, the observations this report is based on predate the founding of Aero, and like you said that Aero is fully operational, but really it's it hasn't even been funded. It won't be operational until 2024, and anyway, we're already working on it, so don't worry about it.
okay. So come
The
back in
report
a
makes
couple
it clear.
years.
We consider this recommendation open until they do something about it. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
thanks. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Nice.
Recommendations 2 through 4 were identical, but were targeted
Okay.
at different branches of the military.
Okay.
We recommend that the secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Air Force issue interim guidance for UAP while waiting for the DoD to issue policy. At a minimum, this guidance for UAP should integrate existing intelligence, counterintelligence, and force protection policies and procedures, integrate procedures for coordinating with geographic combat commands, incorporate roles, responsibilities, and requirements for the military services and their respective military department counterintelligence operations.
Yeah. Okay. So while you're waiting for the DoD to get their shit together, get your own house in order. Sounds
Yep.
good. How'd they respond?
Okay, so these were all broken out into their own sections. The responses, I've summarized them down to the most pointed bit, but in a nutshell, the Secretary of the Army agreed in principle with the recommendations.
Okay.
The Secretary of hold on, this gets better. The Secretary of the Navy did not provide official comments for inclusion in our final report as requested. Per my email.
Yeah, right.
However, they responded after our final report and agreed with the recommendation.
Okay, sure.
And best of all, the Secretary of the Air Force did not provide official comments for inclusion in this report as we requested in our draft report. However, they provided us informal comments saying, "We concur without comment."
What does that even mean? Like, you can neither confirm nor deny, but I definitely agree.
Good Lord, bunch of non-committal mofos.
Yeah, seriously. So what? Okay, that's the three. But what about like the Marines and Space Force and?
That is a great question. I don't know how often the Marines are treated as a fully separate branch, as opposed to kind of being lumped under the Navy. I'm not in the military. Forgive me, any Marines out there. I'm not trying to slight you guys. But like Chuck, I found the exclusion of the Space Force.
Especially
rather noticeable in a report about recommendations to military departments regarding UAP. Feels like those would be the guys to talk to. Maybe that's one of the other 6 classified recommendations.
Yeah, there's got to be at least 6 other departments under the DOD, right?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Recommendation 5. We recommend that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff issue guidance for the geographic combat commanders regarding UAP detection, reporting, collection, analysis, and identification within their areas of responsibility. At a minimum, the guidance should include tools to help commands determine the threats posed by UAP.
Okay. So in addition to telling the DoD as a whole and the individual branches plans, they're reaching out directly to regional commanders to do the same. That makes sense. How Joint Chiefs take that?
Quote, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff did not provide official comments for inclusion in our final report as requested. However, the Joint Staff issued guidance to the geographic combat commanders on UAP detection, reporting, collection, analysis, and identification within their areas of responsibility.
Wow. So they, actually, I'd prefer that. You know what? Don't even tell me. Just go get it done. Well done.
Yeah. So the report actually specifically says that the DOD Inspector General considers this recommendation closed. It did not say that about any of the others.
All right, well, 1 out of 11. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if that's good.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
That's a failing grade in my book. Liberation Times was able to confirm that only one of the recommendations has been fully implemented and the other 10 are still being implemented.
Okay.
Quote from Liberation Times here. The lack of apparent urgency when faced with potential risks has been met with disbelief among Liberation Times sources. DOD and intelligence sources have told Liberation Times that the news represents a, quote, utter failure.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. And to say it in a little bit longer way, Ryan Graves, who you may remember is one of the UFO witnesses and pilots that we saw at the congressional hearing, his group, Americans for Safe Aerospace, said, quote, unidentified objects in friendly airspace represent a clear and present danger to our pilots and soldiers. UFO stigma and Cold War mentality are unforgivable excuses for ignoring the problem.
Yeah.
Pilots have been trying to raise the alarm for over a decade and have unfairly borne the brunt of this stigma. As the DoD Inspector General makes clear, the U.S. Air Force and Army in particular need to institute first-class solutions for detection, reporting, tracking, and characterization of UAP. We note the Space Force also has a duty to respond. So we're not the only ones who are like, you didn't mention the Space Force, buddy. We note the Space Force also has a duty to report into the whole of government effort. And much more needs to be done in terms of data sharing and accountability. We hope the DoD Inspector General investigation will motivate Congress to raise the pressure to close this domain awareness gap and be transparent with the American people about its findings. The status quo is unacceptable.
Oh, I love that. Such a good line. So, like, I don't love the framing of UAP as purely a security threat, but
Total.
You know, if that's what you need to use, it's kind of frustrating to see the military still shrug it off and do nothing.
Totally. Yeah. And we've talked about this before, right? Like, a lot of people don't like that Lue and Chris talk about UAPs as a flight safety problem, as a potential security risk. But Lue has been very clear in interviews, and we've talked about this before, that that's the language that they speak. Yeah. You know, if you want to change something about how the military handles it, you don't go to them and talk about, you know, like, wouldn't it be great if information was free? And don't you think more people should know about? No, like, hey, there's a thing flying around in the sky that, by your own admission, we don't know what it is. That's a problem. Isn't that our whole deal? So, I'm 100% with you. I don't like that is the default framing. But if that's how you're going to think about it, and then you still do nothing, that's hard. Yeah. That's hard to hear.
Yeah. It's like the military complex isn't motivated by peace for some reason. I don't know.
I know, it's crazy. You know, and the one bit of credit that I will give to the DoD is the kind of big picture that I have gathered over the years about this is that the military vibe on this has been to investigate it and determine that it appears to be non-hostile, whatever it is. And even if it was hostile, we can't do anything about it. It outperforms us by such a shocking margin that we are effectively helpless. That ain't a report you're ever going to hear from a military commander. Like, yeah, there's something up there and we can do jack and shit about it. I
mean, it'd be really helpful if they did, though.
Yeah. Like, I kind of get why they might be like, yeah, let's just not talk about it. It's not actually a threat. So,
yeah. But if think about, like, I know that movies aren't reality, but like, if you think about, most of the movies start this way. Most of the UFO movies start this way. It's like, you know, asteroid is coming towards us. We have to, like, mobilize all our resources as a like united world and deal with that. Like, we could pull pretty significant power, but we have to admit it.
Did you watch? There was a Netflix movie a couple of years ago called Don't Look Up. It was what's his name? Titanic. Pretty boy.
Oh, Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah, Leo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence play a couple of scientists who find an asteroid that's going to hit Earth and end all life. Yeah. And they do, you know, the first 10 minutes of the movie are all the stuff you'd expect. You know, they're flown to Washington to meet the president, and basically, this is gonna cause a lot of negative press, and they just don't talk about it. And these two scientists just gradually lose their minds over the course of the movie as no one takes any steps to do anything about it.
Oh, so this is not a comedy film.
It kind of is. It's kind of like Idiocracy. Like, it's funny, but it's also like a really heavy-handed political message. There's no dodging what this is about, you know? Anyway.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't know if I'd
about
recommend
aliens. Is it about aliens or is it about climate change in your mind?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's about our tendency to avoid problems that we don't like to talk about. So it can apply equally to all of them.
Yeah, both. Okay, cool.
All right. So speaking of things we would rather not talk about,
God. Okay.
Sean Kirkpatrick, former director
Yeah.
of Arrow. We talked about him recently. He put out an article in Scientific American where he was broadly dismissive of UAP whistleblower claims. He said, quote, "None of them have any firsthand evidence or knowledge. They're all relaying stories that they've heard from other people." He argued that everything came from a, quote, "small group of interconnected believers who have misled Congress into believing that there's some sort of cover-up." And the one bit of good news I have about this, and the only reason we're still talking about it, is he received quite a bit of pushback in the weeks since he published.
Yeah, no shit. Let me just pull over my vintage popcorn machine. I really do need to actually get one just for this show.
the visual prop, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got a bunch of reactions here. They're all great. First of all, after the DOD Inspector General report dropped, Politico reached out to Kirkpatrick for comment, and he said that he told Pentagon leadership that Arrow needed to talk with the public more, but that he always met internal resistance when trying to engage the media. He said, quote, "There is a very strong concern to engage in the public discourse as often as I thought we needed to. The fact that they can't figure out how to get at that message without concern for spillage into other areas has always been a frustrating point. If there's a void in the information space, it will be filled with the imagination of the public and the conspiracies and these accusations."
I mean, that actually sounds reasonable. Like, does this mean he wanted to communicate, but was and was instructed to do so, but was prevented somehow?
He's certainly saying that he wanted to communicate, and he is strongly implying that he was told he could not. Pentagon spokesperson Eric Pahone flatly denied Kirkpatrick's claim that he was muzzled. He said, quote, "Standard procedure within the department is to have public engagements cleared by higher officials. To our knowledge, any media engagement Dr. Kirkpatrick recommended or requested was approved."
Yeah. All right. They hung him out to dry real good. I love that.
Yeah. And no pulling the punches here.
Don't bring your dirty laundry over here.
Liberation Times looked into whether Kirkpatrick's article was submitted to the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. Now, after Grush's claims, we learned a lot about the DOPSR review process. And the moral of the story is every DOD employee has a lifelong responsibility to submit any public disclosure based on protected information for review, right? Mm-hmm. If you learned something in your job and you want to talk about it in public, whether that's a YouTube video, a slide deck, a fiction book, whatever, it has to go through DOPSR review to make sure you're not accidentally leaking secrets.
So, did they do it?
That's
did Kirkpatrick submit it?
It is unclear whether he submitted it. An anonymous source told them, "This is troubling for two reasons. If Dr. Kirkpatrick did not have it reviewed, it's a serious breach of standing DOD policy and could result in another Inspector General complaint against the department. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if he did have it reviewed and they approved it, that's also problematic because in his article, he provides a summary of the results of a study for Congress and the DOD that has not been completed yet or provided to the U.S. government." He's talking about the historical review where Kirkpatrick kind of made it clear that it's a bunch of bunk. One must then ask questions. Who gave him authority to release the results of a report before they were provided to Congress? If the study is ongoing, where is the analysis? If he's biased, why is he still being used by the Department of Defense as an unpaid consultant to advise the Deputy Secretary of Defense?
Wow. That's, yeah. Oh my god. And like the fact that the DOD hung him out to dry also suggests
Mhm.
that he probably didn't go through it. Oh man. Okay. I
Yeah.
love that.
Now, of course, we don't know. We have
Yeah.
no insight,
Yep.
but I had not thought about it from this angle, and I like that they point out that, hey, it's problematic either way. This is
Yeah.
not good.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Holy shit. Well, maybe
we've talked.
maybe he can get fired twice.
They rehire him just to shit can him a second time. We've talked a lot about Chris UFO Daddy Mellon, the show's oldest fan,
Mhm.
former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. He put out a few pointed comments about Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Awesome.
The stark contradiction between sources approaching Capitol Hill on the UAP issue, some of whom I know personally, and the claims of former Aero director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick remain frustratingly unresolved.
Mm.
I was astonished by one of the central claims made by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick in his recent article in Scientific American, blasting UAP conspiracists. Specifically, his claim that, quote, as of the time of my departure, none, let me repeat, none of the conspiracy-minded whistleblowers in the public eye had elected to come to Aero to provide their evidence and state for the record, despite numerous invitations, end quote.
Oh my god.
Mellon continues, he says, I'm baffled because in an effort to assist his investigation, I introduced Dr. Kirkpatrick to the former director of the ATIP program, Lue Elizondo, as well as Dr. Eric Davis, who we know from the Wilson Davis notes, and Dr. Hal Puthoff. Each of these prominent voices associated with the ATIP program spent hours briefing Dr. Kirkpatrick in a classified setting. None have received any feedback. Hopefully, the pending report to Congress on the alleged UAP recovery program will describe the specific claims made by these and dozens of other witnesses and what Aero did to evaluate them.
Oh my god. Yeah. UFO Daddy comes in with all the receipts, and I love it.
That's right. You come for the king, you best not miss. Lue Elizondo reiterated, many, let me repeat, many of the people who I know personally have spoken to Aero and provided detailed information to Kirkpatrick and his office for the record. If Aero isn't willing to tell the truth to Congress, we are.
Shit. Yeah. Elizondo's bringing the heat too. This is great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. An anonymous former an anonymous former government official familiar with Kirkpatrick told Liberation Times, quote, now we see why whistleblowers did not trust Kirkpatrick. It will be very difficult for the Department of Defense to regain faith and trust with new whistleblowers, given the behavior and deceitfulness of Kirkpatrick. His article appears to be written from the perspective of someone who failed at their job and is now throwing a child's fit of rage.
I'm not bad at my job. You're bad at my job. Your job.
Absolutely. Merrick von Rennenkampf, a former DOD appointee and analyst who we've talked about before on the show, said that a Senate source told him, quote, Kirkpatrick appears to be a disinformation agent. He is not being honest about what he heard from the whistleblowers that were referred. Merrick went on to claim that Aero shared no information on these UAP whistleblowers with Congress, and that the Deputy Secretary of Defense Hicks may have fired Kirkpatrick.
Yeah. Wait, how are those two related? That they didn't share and the Secretary of Defense fired Kirkpatrick.
I don't think they're related. It was just 3
Okay.
claims about Kirkpatrick that he made.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes
Now,
sense.
we discussed rumors that Kirkpatrick might have been
Yeah.
shit canned. You know,
I
we've
mean,
talked about
obviously
that
it
for
was.
a while. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to think so, but who knows?
Yeah.
Now, the disinformation one is really interesting because we've
Yeah.
heard similar claims from Matthew Pines, another source we've brought up on the show before. He's a director of security advisory at Sentinel-1. He said that a highly cleared source in the DoD Senior Executive Service claimed that Arrow is, quote, entirely a disinformation activity designed to cover and distract with no qualms about misleading Congress.
Wow. Shit. I wish that didn't feel so plausible, but it
Right?
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is the thing. We've talked about Arrow on this show literally since the day it was stood up. I might not be right about that. It feels like it's been that long.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether we started a show after Arrow started. But certainly the entire time we've talked about Arrow, we have waffled over, are they a force for good? Are they actually doing the job they were given? There have been times where it felt like Kirkpatrick was a well-meaning guy who was stuck between a rock and a hard place. You know, Senator Gillibrand is coming after him like, do you have everything you need? Trying to set him up for success. He's an employee of Congress, basically. But on paper, he's an employee of the DOD, and his bosses appear to be telling him, do as little as humanly possible. We've heard rumors that Kirkpatrick was bad at his previous jobs and was given this job because he was expected to fail.
Yeah.
We've heard that Kirkpatrick was hired as a disinformation agent, that Susan Goff, the Pentagon spokesperson, has been using him as a way to come up with a way to say the DOD doesn't know anything about UAP because Arrow doesn't know anything about UAP because we told them not to look. So there's still a million ways to interpret it. But what I will say is Kirkpatrick's continued public stances seem increasingly to paint the picture of someone who was aggressively uninterested in getting to the truth of the matter. He admitted with his own words that when he found out about these alleged secret programs, he went to the places they were supposed to be and asked the program directors, do you have this program? And when they said no, he took them at their word.
Right.
Which is not how you run an investigation into an illegal secret program. It's like going to the mafia and be like, hey, you guys are all stand-up citizens. You pay your taxes, right? They go, yeah, of course. You go, good enough for me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Checks out.
This Al Capone guy seems on the level.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I wish we didn't have to talk about Kirkpatrick anymore. Maybe he will finally take the advice of my favorite YouTube lawyers. It's Shut the Fuck Up Friday guys. That would be great. You know, I don't want to talk about this guy anymore. I'm tired of trying to find ways to eke out how he could plausibly be a guy who was prevented from doing a good job. In face of increasingly visible evidence that he was aggressively uninterested in doing the job.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe Arrow's better off without him. Maybe Arrow is fundamentally flawed because it exists in the same power structure. Maybe nothing's going to happen until Big Daddy Lue kicks in the door of the House of Representatives with more witnesses in tow. But yeah, I would very much like to stop talking about Sean Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, no kidding. Me too.
All right. Well, that about wraps us up for today. I think I haven't actually looked at the notes, but I think we're about to go record a little something extra for our Patreon subscribers, right?
Yeah, a little Q&A section. I realized that I haven't done a great job of responding to comments. And so like, hey, this is an opportunity. Let's just record it and we'll get some hot takes from Scott.
Well, it lines up with something we've been talking about for a while, which is trying to find more rewards for Patreons besides just a good feeling that you're helping us make the show. We're not interested in necessarily recording like whole extra shows, although that's a possibility. We've talked about a bunch of ideas. Long story short, if you're on the fence about whether to join the Patreon and you have ideas about what would convince you, reach out. Let us know. We are considering options. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, first of all, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. But also don't feel shy about letting us know, like what would help you feel better? What would be more value for the money? Obviously the show is a time commitment. Chuck and I both have full-time jobs. That's why we're putting it out every 2 weeks instead of more often. So we're probably not going to do anything that would be a huge time commitment, but the thing we're going to try today is just Chuck and I are going to stay on the call a little bit longer, record some extra questions. That seems like something we can do pretty easily. And a nice benefit for Patreon subscribers. So anyway, I've rambled enough. Long story short, Patreon subscribers, you're awesome. And if you're on the fence about being a Patreon subscriber, let us know what it would take to convince you.
Yeah, totally. And just digging into our outro, if you do want to tell us, hit us up at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com.
And oh my God, I'm totally off now. I'm scrolling back up to our outro. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our social media accounts.
And Scott, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.